Plan for the worst. What are we having? Sausages? Fresh and buds now.
Fresh and
All right, folks, welcome back to yet another episode of Fresh and Buds. I'm your host, Tommy Fresh, and you are all my buds. It is episode 227 of the show. It's the holiday season. Things are in a lull a little bit with Flesh and Blood, but we just got a lot of news this week in terms of ban announcement. Also, a hero LL'd. We'll be talking about that. But of course, I do need to mention we're joined by Trade Federations, aka Tim. Has a great channel over on YouTube. How's it going, Tim? Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm doing very well. It feels kind of weird to be on this show, having watched it since I think I started watching in Bright Lights. So it's very strange to be on, and thank you again for having me.
That's funny that you started in Bright Lights. That probably was the most negative I ever was on the show. It's like, what is this mech stuff? But you know, we've reconciled with that set. But happy to have you here. We're gonna get to know you, talk a little bit about your channel, your content, your history, and then we're gonna talk about the bans, of course, because it's a big shakeup for RTN season coming up next month, and we still don't really know a lot about Compendium. So we just are looking at January and what that season's going to be like. But first, got to get to know you. You have a great channel. I've been watching your content forever. A fellow Riptide enjoyer. I got to know where to start, because I know you've been making content for a long time, but not always Flesh and Blood.
Yeah, so I don't come from places I'm proud of. I started off as a Yu-Gi-Oh content creator, and that was born out of a frustration with just always playing online and not really getting much from it. And I was like, well, I have this hobby, so I want to get something out of it. And so I'll make videos, to try and at least improve at a certain skill, and also to get my opinion out there. To put people in the Discord down, have my voice be the loudest, essentially. But back then it was for Yu-Gi-Oh, so it was even more pointless. But yeah, no, it started off as a Yu-Gi-Oh channel, and then as time progressed, I got into Flesh and Blood. Yu-Gi-Oh, if you're not familiar, is you'll have a very toxic relationship with Yu-Gi-Oh. You'll go from like 10 bad formats into one okay format. You're like, oh, Konami finally understands. And just ever so slowly and slowly, I just moved out of Yu-Gi-Oh, went into Flesh and Blood, realized it was everything I ever wanted in TCG, run by a company that actually cares about the game. The gameplay is very immersive. It's not over in one turn. And so, yeah, I just kind of started making content. I think Dromai was my first hero I started making content with, and then gradually moved on to other things as I settled into the game. So that is my embarrassing history with content creation.
It's not. Trust me. There's worse things on all of our histories in the internet. So Yu-Gi-Oh is probably the least of your worries. But how long were you playing Yu-Gi-Oh, and what was the reason that you started making the jump into Flesh and Blood?
Yeah, so I played Yu-Gi-Oh as a kid I played it. I loved playing it as a kid. And then as an adult, I just got hit by a bit of nostalgia, I guess. And I was like, I'll try this out again, see what it's like. And I realized I actually very much enjoyed the competitive TCG environment. And so I got quite into the game, met a lot of friends. In fact, most of the people, or a good portion of my Flesh and Blood locals, are people that I brought across from Yu-Gi-Oh into Flesh and Blood, because they also were like, oh, this is the game we wanted to play. So yeah, I played Yu-Gi-Oh for a few years, and then lockdown hit, and I'm not sure if you're too familiar with Yu-Gi-Oh, but we had some crazy power creep over the lockdown kind of period. We had Tier 0 tier elements format, which was just horrific, and we kind of slugged through that, me and my friends, and just something broke in us. And I think at that point we realized Konami were never going to bother balancing their game. We're never going to have a good format. And Dynasty had just come out for Flesh and Blood. I think I'd seen Sloop Dupe's channel come up, and also my local game store had some cards come in. And I was blown away by how cool they looked. I thought Magic had finally made some good looking cards. And I was like, whoa, what are these cool Magic cards from the new set? And it was Flesh and Blood. And I think from there on in, I just kind of slowly got into it, built my first deck. I just loved the depth of the gameplay and how much it rewarded practice and knowledge. You didn't really get that in Yu-Gi-Oh! It was kind of solitaire-esque in many ways.
Yeah, it's from my knowledge of Yu-Gi-Oh, I was never into Yu-Gi-Oh. Like I played when I was younger, and a lot of my friends tried to play, and then I tried to get them
Mhm.
into Magic at the time because I preferred more that kind of fantasy, you know, tropes and stuff like that in my card game. But I also didn't like how swingy Yu-Gi-Oh could be, you know. And I gotta say, Flesh and Blood's on the opposite end of the spectrum, albeit with some exceptions with like Blitz. But how was that move from such a explosive game like Yu-Gi-Oh to something that could be a little bit more methodical and a lot more decisions matter in Flesh and Blood?
Mhm. Well, so when it came to Yu-Gi-Oh, I was never much of a combo enjoyer. I much more preferred the mid-range kind of draw the game out a few turns kind of play style. I in Yu-Gi-Oh, I used to play a deck called Abyss Actors, which is an absolutely ridiculous bonkers deck that's as stupid as it sounds. It's kind of like the Riptide of Yu-Gi-Oh, essentially. Um, so when I made the transition to Flesh and Blood, I wasn't coming from like a kind of combo gameplay background. It was already like I'm trying to make these games last longer already in Yu-Gi-Oh, and here's a game where that is kind of hard to not make that happen essentially unless you're against Kano or something like that. And I think my first proper hero was Dromai, and so being a board state hero, having allies like pseudo monsters as it were, there's a bit of familiarity there, and it kind of helped walk me into the game a little bit. And yeah, it's kind of the gameplay was so good. The local scene as well was everyone was super nice, a lot more kind of mature, and yeah, I just kind of just went with it kind of straight away.
Never looked back. It is kind of funny, and I know you're a Riptide enjoyer. It is funny to know that you were a Yu-Gi-Oh guy, where like traps are like a main like thing in that game, and even if you don't even play Yu-Gi-Oh, but you watch the anime, you know that traps are huge. And then here we have this hero, Riptide, who loves traps. Was that a reason you were like, I gotta try this hero out? Or were there other reasons?
So I think that was actually one of the first reasons. I actually got into the hero through a friend of mine who was playing Arachne Huntsman, and because he just loved the aesthetic of the hero. And this was back when Huntsman was really, really bad. This is kind of just post Outsiders kind of Huntsman. And I was playing Dromai, which is obviously at the time a very, very strong deck. And I was like, I'm kind of tired of playing one of the best decks in the format. Why don't we build a really bad hero together? And he was like, "Oh, I've been playing Riptide. It's got traps. You activate my trap card, kind of thing." Even though they're kind of not really functionally, it's not that similar, but it was enough. It was enough. And so I got into Riptide by basically wanting to build this really bad hero and just have fun because it was quite a cheap hero to build at the time as well. And I guess through testing Riptide, I found a version, or at least I started playing. I was like, he's not Huntsman levels. He's like, this guy's actually quite, he's not down in the bottom end. There's maybe something here to work with if a few things were to go his way.
Yeah, that's the big caveat, right? With Riptide, and like I played a lot of Riptide, and you're just like, wow, if there just was like one less player or one less hero in the meta, like Riptide's
Yeah.
like cooking, right? And you're just like, oh man. And then there's that, one or two heroes that always end up at the top of the meta. It feels like, and you're just like, oh, God. But I love to hear, that's how you got into them. Now, you are, based on watching your content, first of all, I do have to ask, what's the story behind the channel name? Because it's to my knowledge, it's not card game related, but it might be.
It's also not Star Wars related, just for the record. It's I enjoy board gaming as well as card gaming, and I play quite a lot of Catan. And this is just very random, but I was having a drunk game of Catan once with some friends at uni. This was a while ago now, and I was crushing all of them. Like they were all ganging up against me, and I was just steamrolling them. Just one of those freak games. And in my hubris, I was like, "Oh, you want to trade with me? You're gonna have to ask the trade federations to sign an agreement." It was the trade federations of the Tim or something at the time, which, needless to say, was very annoying for them to deal with, and I enjoyed greatly. And I think just since then, it's kind of always been a name that's stuck in my head. And yes, the first thing that came to my mind when I was like, well, what do I call my channel? I can't give it my name because my surname is like word soup, so it has to be something a bit easier and maybe a bit more recognizable.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's awesome. It's like, some board game lore in there. You create your own
Oh yeah.
Federation Catan, which is which is pretty cool. Now, one thing I've noticed in your content throughout the years now is that you are a barbed castaway truther.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would label you. This is a weapon that I truly love and never found success with it. I moved over. I became a dreadbore truther to like varying degrees of success. But what is it about barbed castaway? Are we still missing something with that weapon? Is the future of Riptide in his signature weapon?
It's a lot of good questions, some of which I often ask myself over the course of playtesting Riptide. If you'd asked me this question a year ago, and we'd have seen Stone Rain come out, Line It Up come out, Murky Water come out. These all synergized phenomenally well with Bard Castaway, to the point where it became an actual viable Riptide strategy, of course viable for Riptide levels. And so I think it's clear that LSS want to push Riptide in a sort of aim counter direction based on the support that he's got. I'm just not entirely sure, given the new card he got in Super Slam, that it's Bard Castaway Riptide that they're trying to push here, essentially. Because that new card works very, very well with Sandscar Riptide, which is what I've been playing a lot of. But Bard Castaway is, I hope, the future for Riptide, because I just love an instant speed bow that has two different abilities, and there's just so many small things you can do in a game to try and eke out advantage by using the bow. Essentially, it's not necessarily the most powerful thing that's ever existed. It doesn't draw a card, doesn't have a great passive effect, but it is really fun to do things at instant speed in Flesh and Blood. And loading arrows at instant speed is one of those things, at least for me.
Yeah, and honestly, just even be able to like, I got an extra resource floating. Let me throw the aim counter on now. I love that bow. I'm with you right now that I'm realizing that Sand Scour, at least with Take the Bait, is a really powerful interaction. Especially with Murky Water, and you're just like, oh wow, this feels so good, and and you go get one of the really good traps back, and they have to decide whether they want to waste their turn or not. It just is like a really cool way. Now, I gotta ask, with Compendium of Wraith coming out, this is a supplemental set. You start around Dynasty, not the last supplemental set, but the last one where everyone was kind of supported in a way. What do you hope we get for Riptide? Because they said everybody's getting something.
Yeah. So we've seen the new Ranger boots. I think it's the Battle Worn 1, Pay 1 arrow that has higher than base gets go again. That's already quite an interesting place to start from, especially for Bard Castaway, because you use Murky Water as your centerpiece, and you like to have a lot of floating resources to use your bow for, eking out those small bits of advantage. And so I'm already quite happy with those boots. I think there's something to play with. The Ranger boot pool is growing rapidly without kind of a clear favorite at the minute. But if I were to be able to pick and choose something, I would love something that increases the consistency of Bard Castaway, because I think the power level is there when it works. You can have some phenomenally good disruption, and yeah, it's just the consistency that's kind of laying it down right now. You've got a deck with arrows, pumps that block 2, and traps. And now you even have action cards, like you play things like Plan for the Worst, maybe, you play Take the Bait, maybe. And these are 4 different types of card that at the minute don't really mesh well together. You've got Murky Water, which interacts with the traps, but it would be lovely to see something that was maybe a pump that could get a trap back, or just something that kind of glued the deck together a bit more. Maybe not the effect I mentioned, because now that I think about it, it's not that good, but just something to give the deck a bit more consistency, essentially.
Listen, I don't think like a 0 for 3, get a trap back on hit from your like graveyard. I think it would be pretty
broken, actually.
Yeah, it'd be pretty cool. It'd be pretty cool. You send your like drill shot, like you keep the two card hand, you send the drill shot for 7. You're like, like in some instances, like if the opponent didn't have like equipment left, they wouldn't have blocked it. Now they have to actually consider it. So, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm kind of with you. I want something that kind of bridges the gap there because I wouldn't say it's like fragmented, but the one card that I always look at is chain reaction. And this is such an interesting and like a potentially really powerful trap, right? Where you look at it like, okay, wow, that's amazing with Plan for the Worst, right? You're just like, holy smokes. If I get this off, like you feel like you're winning. And then even things like Codex of Blood Rot, I don't really like it with Frailty as much. You could potentially make an argument for Codex of Inertia, but like I want to see more things that chain reaction work well with, right? And I think Plan for the Worst is a good one. I guess like Take the Bait is kind of neat too. You can kind of say, hey, this is the end of your turn if you want if you want to just pass, but that is kind of what I want, but we'll see. I'm not getting my hopes up. I'll tell you that much, Tim.
Yeah, Riptide support over the years has been quite, maybe fragmented is the right word. It kind of seems like they're not quite sure what they want to do with the hero. And Chain Reaction is quite a good example of that, I think, because there's a lot of action cards that do work with it, but they're just not quite good, outside of Codex of Frailty at least. In generic Riptide lists, you won't see them running Codex of Inertia and Chain Reaction because Codex of Inertia just isn't quite good enough to run without that interaction with Chain Reaction. So it'd be amazing to get another action card that was good enough on its own to run, and then it's even better with Chain Reaction.
Yeah, that would be neat because the potential upside of that card is so good. I mean, I think Plan for the Worst is truly the best thing you could do, but I think we can LSS, you can push it a little bit. Come on. Give us more tools. I know everybody always complains about the Riptide special or what do they call them? Expansion slots, but we've earned them, right?
We have. Have you read Reelin? We deserve some good ones now. Like Verdant has had nothing but bangers. It's about time Riptide had some too.
Oh, Reelin. Oh man, that is a card that I tried to make work so hard, but
poor man.
Yeah, it's not really that good, but I do love Intoxicating Shots, so I gotta give a shout out to that. Now, speaking of things that I love and you probably also love, Flesh and Blood cards. It is the Fresh Faves. I'm gonna ask you some of your favorite cards in the game. You're gonna answer them, I hope. The first,
okay.
Who is your favorite hero?
I would try not to be boring with this one, but it has to be Riptide. I've tried. I play other heroes, and I like playing them, but there's just something in my brain that gets ticked when I play Riptide. I think it's just the Ranger card pool, and also just the his hero text. There's two different effects. They're both really cool. Just the aesthetic of him. It's great. So I would have to go with Riptide on that one.
Good answer. Now, what's your favorite weapon?
So this is a bit of a tie. I quite like Volzar because I love how it ties in thematically of what it actually does. You play lightning cards, it's charging up, and then you just like shoomp with lightning. It's very cool. But I'd also have to choose Death Dealer because it's the first bow where I guess ever had any sort of success with Riptide on. And so it's got a bit of a nostalgic feel for me because myself and my friend who plays Riptide, Gustavo, you might have seen some of his stuff on my channel. We started off with that bow, and so it's got a soft spot in our heart, as it were.
Yeah, it's pretty good too. It is pretty good. What's your favorite equipment?
I'm gonna have to. This is a good. I was looking at this one, and this is quite a tough one, but I'd have to be a bit boring again and go with Fiendel Spring Tunic, just because it is an unusual choice, or at least it was for Riptide at the time. And so when we first started playing with Tunic and people were very kind of taken aback by it, it felt very novel to do. It felt very cool, like I love taking a deck and just putting something in it that's completely different and just rolling with it and seeing how it goes. And in the case of Tunic, I think we've had some very memorable occasions with it, essentially. So even though it's a generic, it's been out since the start of the game, has nothing to do with the Riptide or anything, it still has that spot for me.
I mean, it's iconic for a reason. I remember seeing, one of your first lists with Tunic and personally, I'm a trench lover, so I felt like, get off my lawn. I'm not playing Tunic in this deck. But I understand, like, it's like one of those things, like, I watched the deck tech, and you guys kind of explain why Tunic is there, and I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. Actually, like, makes a lot of sense, but I'm still playing Trench,
So the amount of people that have said that to me, like, hey, it makes sense, but I'm never not playing Trench. It's like, all right.
Man, I just love it too much to not, but that's okay. Now, what's your favorite all-time card to throw into your deck?
Into any deck at all?
Any deck at all.
My favorite all-time card. You're gonna have to give me a minute to think about this one.
We get a lot of generics answered here, but there's also some good class-specific card.
So I think the problem is that this card is something that I had as an answer for a later question, but I'll go over it again anyway. So I would say it's Ravenous Rabble, actually.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of fun memories for that. And the reason I've chosen Ravenous Rabble is because in Valencia, this is the Battle Hardened, when our Riptide list first kind of came to prominence, in the top 8 of the ProQuest Plus, I played against Max Dietman. He got second at Pro Tour London and Spanish Nats champ multiple times. And he was trying to fatigue me on Hatchet Dory. And we played this hour and a half long game of, like, it was in like third, fourth cycle at this point. And I had no cards left in my deck. And I had a full hand and a Ravenous Rabble in my arsenal. And I was like, I just need to check something with the judge very quickly. And the judge confirmed that I can indeed play the Rabble, and it comes in for 5, and that won me the game. And so Rabble for 5 is always going to be a core memory for me.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome. That's a great answer. That is a great answer. Now, if you were to live in the world of Wraith, what class and talent would you be?
I love the idea of being a ranger. I tried my very best to not get into ranger when I started this game, because any game I ever play is just a ranger, and I was like, I'm not doing it again, and I just happened to fall into it. And I'd probably go with ice because I live in Scotland and it's incredibly cold here right now. I mean, I know there are people who live in North America where it is actually considerably colder, but you guys can probably feel me when I say it's really bloody cold right now. So there you
How
go.
cold is it right now?
So where I live in the middle of the countryside, it's right now kind of getting down to like the -5 degrees Celsius, which it isn't too bad, but we often get down to like -17, 18, just for fun. So yeah.
So minus, I don't really know the
Are you
conversion.
Fahrenheit?
Not Fahrenheit, but I know 0 degrees Celsius is 32 degrees Fahrenheit. So was that probably like 20 degrees Fahrenheit? If I had to guess, I don't know. I'm going to get flamed in the comments.
I'm not going to try it.
That's all right. It's about the same where I'm at now. It's a cold winter. I love Scotland. Went there for my honeymoon last year, and it was amazing.
Oh, nice. Whereabouts did you go?
Oh, we were in Edinburgh, and then we went to Speyside, and then we went to out to the Highlands. We saw Loch Ness. Nessie didn't show her face. That's okay. And they were in Isle Skye for a couple days, which was beautiful as well. It was a lot of fun. A lot of whiskey, a lot of seafood, and a lot of hiking. And that was the perfect trip. But I digress. We got to get back to Flesh and Blood. And I got to ask you, what's the greatest set of all time, in your estimation, by whichever metric you want to answer?
Okay. I, for this one, would answer Rosetta, actually. I really love that set. I love the aesthetic of it. I loved the limited aspect of it. I'm not really a big limited fan, but I found the fact that you could play combo in draft was so much fun for me. And it was the set where Acilio was released, which I also love Acilio, so it would have to be that for me. It does have a counter point to it in that it did release Count Your Blessings as well, but because that's banned, I'm happy to scratch that from the record.
Yeah. I like, honestly, sometimes I forget that card existed because it feels like so long ago that it was just like every deck was a Count Your Blessings deck, and I was like, oh. But good call on banning that LSS. But that's a great answer. I don't know if it's my favorite set, but limited wise, I gotta agree with you that I think that draft format was awesome. Aesthetics, amazing. And, I mean, Aurora was good. I don't think she was great. She was just very popular. Acilio, amazing. Such a cool hero. The Earth heroes, I like them, but I could take or leave them, based on the day and which deck I'm playing. But very, very cool set. Like that answer. Now, let's talk about some bans, folks. We got bans. And last week when Elaine was on, we talked about the dev talk. And on that dev talk, Brian did mention, hey, we think the format's really healthy right now, but we understand that things need to be shaken up every once in a while or else things get stale. I happen to agree with that sentiment because I didn't really want to go into RTN season and play the same format that I had been playing for the past couple months, and I think some other people felt that way as well. Other people probably were pretty happy to keep things at the status quo. How did you feel about like a potential shakeup when they mentioned that?
I was 100% for a shakeup. I love the idea I like the way LSS has handled the ban list before, and I like that they're not afraid to change the way they handle it. And as a result, changing a format just for the sake of it, because people are bored, is a good enough reason, in my opinion. No one lost a lot of money, nothing expensive was hit, and now we get a brand new format to work with. And I, for one, was absolutely tired of playing into Syndra, just the same Syndra list over and over again. And so I'm hoping this shakes things up quite a bit, which from the looks of things already, it should at least.
Yeah. The next couple of weeks will really tell us what is going to rise to the top. But of course, we're going to make speculations right now because we're content creators and people can't stop us. But first of all, what was banned? Brand with Cinderclaw, all 3 colors banned. The reasoning, just to kind of paraphrase, was, well, it makes the payoffs of turning things into Draconic and Syndra way too accessible. I think this had been brought up by a lot of people, when they would discuss Syndra. Not really surprised to see it go. I thought they would have been a little bit lighter on this ban, but they went pretty heavy because they also banned for Syndra Wrath of Retribution, which is a one of, but I understand it's a really powerful card, but I don't know. They did it, so it's making the deck a little bit weaker. That's okay. And then they said also no more Rootbound Carapace, all colors. Very interesting. They said Earth, it's too easy for you to defend and decompose. I'm interested to see what this means for those heroes. And then they didn't stop there. Chart the High Seas, another blue starter for Gravy Bones, gone. And then out of nowhere, Orb Weaver Spinneret in blue and yellow, gone. Okay. What do you make of this? What did you think initially when you saw this ban announcement?
So I think a lot of people were speculating on how LSS would approach this ban list, because no one really had an idea of how they go about doing so without kind of completely killing the heroes. But at the same time, it needed to have an impact. And outside of Wrath, I don't think I expected any of these to be the cards that they hit, but except maybe Chart. But having seen them, I'm actually very happy. I think LSS have done some really good, made some very good choices here. Rootbound being banned, I'd never thought of Decompose as being something that should just be proactive, and Rootbound's the only card that allows you to not be kind of proactive in decomposing, in that you can just block out, decompose, and you get this degenerate kind of Florian lists. And you also allow Verdance to send her attacks for larger damage values while also blocking above rate. It is a little bit unfair, and it is going to create more fun gameplay, in my opinion, now that it's banned. Because the Earth Heroes, like you said, you could take it or leave it. I'm kind of the same. I do find them a bit boring. I repped a lot of Verdance over ProQuest season just because she was very good and I wanted to change. And Rootbound is definitely a big hit for Verdance, a very, very big hit. So it'll be interesting to see how she does going forward, and Florian too.
Yeah, this is something I think I've brought up before, but you kind of hit the nail on the head that the Earth heroes tend to be boring, and I'm hoping like that this ban with Rootbound Carapace kind of changes that, because you mentioned like degenerate Florian list, and it just feels so like one note that you're just like, okay, they're just gonna wait till they can get to a point where they can make 16 rune chants and just win, right? And with defensive tools like Rootbound Carapace, they get so much more time to do that and so much more options to kind of build that out. I'm interested to see what it means. Chart the high seas, yeah. Something was bound to be hitting gravy. Some people think it's not enough, but I think that's still such an interesting deck. Really good players will make use of it, but I think it kind of lives in that realm. And then the Orb Weaver stuff, I guess I didn't have my ear to the ground on Assassin. I know those cards are good, right? I've played against them, but I typically play decks that have a decent matchup into Assassin, so I'm never like, how dare they do this, like make a Chelicera or whatever. What do you think about the Orb Weaver ban?
So I think this is probably the lightest of the hits. It's the one that probably changes. Mario's probably the deck that changes the least from these hits. It's a very good one because when I was thinking about the bans, I was like, yeah, they'll hit Verdance, they'll hit Syndra, they'll hit Gravy, and a lot of people were worried that Mario had already started to creep in as like in some cases that second most represented deck, and it had a phenomenal win rate. And so I am glad they did hit it. And I think this just means that the Mario players have to play a lot more tight. They can't just throw their daggers around. The mask, they're a lot more limited in how they use it. They're going to have to actually transform into Orb Weaver more often than not now, for example, to get that graphene online. So I very much like this hit. It's kind of like a light tap on the wrist compared to, in my opinion, at least the other three. But I'm a big fan of it. I do think Mario needed a little bit of taking down.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. Some of those decks, and like when Assassin's really cooking, especially Marionette, you're like, oh wow, this is very good. So interested to see how the deck building changes. Now let's look to the future a little bit with RTN season coming up. What do you think the future is for Syndra? Is Syndra a player anymore, or are there decks here that she can still make use of?
Yeah, it's very hard to say. So I've played a few games into Syndra already since the ban list, and I'm so ingrained to expect this huge spike from Wrath at some point that playing into Syndra now, knowing that they don't have Wrath, it feels so freeing. And not having Brand with Cinderclaw means that I'm actually possibly getting quite a lot of value by stopping these mark effects, stopping the fealty generation, for example. So I think she's definitely taking quite a bit of a hit, and it depends if she can beat Dash.io. I think Dash.io already had quite a good Syndra matchup, and now with these hits, I expect Dash.io probably to be the better aggro deck. And so when an aggro deck is just outclassed by a different aggro deck, people don't tend to play it. And I'm expecting possibly that for RTN season. That being said, a lot of people played Syndra, and they might still play Syndra because they own Syndra, and it's still a good deck. I don't think it's anything worse than like high B tier, for example. But yeah, this is the one where I don't have any idea, to be honest.
Yeah, at the end of the day, let's say you can't really get a lot of the draconic payoff, right? This deck still is the best Mask of Momentum deck, right?
Yeah.
So that is something, and it is very, very like everything else in that deck is still very powerful. So, I would expect it to still show up, just not be as dominant. Now, moving on to Gravy, what an interesting hero. Just always kind of like floating around the A and S tier, right? On his big ship, but has had to have multiple bans at this point, and we just got another. We chart the high seas. Now, eventually, he's going to kind of like be in a point where his blue starters are going to like be pretty janky, right? If we keep doing it. Do you think that Chart was a very powerful card, so I expect there to be some changes here. He's still got to be good, though.
Yeah, for sure. I think this is the hit where Gravy can most naturally just slot in another playset of blues, and the deck it loses some power for sure. It was a very good ban, but I think the deck mostly stays the same, and you're maybe a little bit less consistent, but you're still Gravy Bones, you still have Chum, you still have Conqueror, you can still do those kind of nutty turns. And as I said, I don't think the deck changes that much from this hit. It's just I'm going to put the next best thing kind of in the deck, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the one that I'm worried the most about, at least in terms of people who enjoy playing those heroes, is the Earth heroes. Because we mentioned it before, Rootbound Carapace going away. It is a big hit, right? Like, Verdance is still really good, right? What she's doing to win games is still there, but she has less tools to get to that point. And then Florian, I don't even know how Florian will be built now. Are they going to focus a little bit more on channel Mount Heroic? You know, kind of like say, hey, we're going to try to be more aggressive now that we can't be as defensive. What are your thoughts? Like, what would you expect? Would you even expect a lot of these heroes to show up next month?
Yeah, so I think your take on Florian is definitely one that I agree with. I think we're just going to see a more aggressive Florian because, well, they've literally taken away one of his best defensive tools. And so like a Channel Mount Heroic, kind of go wide, actively decompose sort of list is something I definitely expect. Verdance, I think, maybe takes a bigger hit than Florian from losing Rootbound. My friend Dan, shout out to him, who I play test Verdance with a lot, was in absolute shambles when Rootbound got hit because you do have Stormstriders, but you do lack a lot of the tools that Florian has, and so being forced to play out maybe like a blue tailing or something just to get online is not great. I remember when Rootbound got hit, I was like, oh, I'll be fine. I'm sure there's some other good decomposed cards that she can run, and there really isn't.
No.
So I think she's in a bit of a rougher spot, and yeah, we'll see. I think Tilling becomes an incredibly important card, especially for Verdance now.
Yeah. Tilling, I mean, I don't know, Blossom and Decay, I don't even think that it was good and limited, but you know, I don't think it's gonna cut the mustard in CC. I mean, like, do you start looking at other ways to banish cards? Like, are you saying we're gonna play call for backups just to present 2 Earth cards to get banished? It should be pretty interesting. Now, Assassin, we kind of already talked about it, but you know, Marionette's gonna have to build the deck a little bit differently. Still probably powerful. That class has a lot of tools. We know Brian loves that class, and I'm sure more tools will come in Compendium. But do you expect any huge shifts here with Assassin?
With Marionette, no. With Assassin in general, maybe we'll see some slippies now that Earth has taken a bit of a hit, and with the new Armory deck, we could see a bit of a resurgence. But again, yeah, like we said, I don't think Mario changes much. I think he's just had maybe 3 new tech slots open up in the deck and maybe 3 other consistency cards added in there to help patch things up a little bit.
Yeah. Likely. Also, worth noting, Kano left the format this weekend. Long time coming. I think that's now all of the Arcane Rising heroes are gone from CC. All 4 of the Welcome to Wraith heroes are still here to play. Just putting it out there, setting the record straight. Kano's gone. This is a hero that, in a way, warps a lot of slots in people's sideboards. It's gone. There's no doubt going to be changes. It opens up certain things, but there's a lot of question marks right now. Is there any initial thoughts here when you saw Kano LL that, you know, were you jumping for joy, perhaps?
Yeah, so besides the absolute elation, I think Kano leaving is possibly maybe even bigger for the RTN meta, because if you look at kind of the pro level, like Pro Tour callings, Kano just doesn't feature that much, but it's at the RTN level, the Pro Quest level, where every Kano player comes out of hiding and brings their Kano deck, so everyone has to run some sort of Kano hate, but no more. So I think that is going to be a huge positive thing for RTN season overall. I don't think anyone was really that sad about Kano leaving the format for good.
Except Kano players, of course. But you know what? Hey, listen, folks, I have faith that they'll print Adult Blaze or something now for all the Wizard enjoyers. But in the meantime, play as Cilio. Cilio's sick. But the biggest question now remains with all these changes, right? Earth got hit, Assassin got hit, no more Kano, Gravy got a little weaker, and Syndra, lost a lot of important, buttery pieces for the deck. Who stands to gain the most this RTN season?
In my opinion, I think the biggest winner from all of this is Dash.io, because she got off scot-free despite making, I think, recently 2 calling finals. Mm-hmm. She made the final in Valencia, and I swear she made the final somewhere else. But Dash.io is a phenomenally good aggro deck, and she has a very good matchup into some of the decks that people are saying might also come up, like a Cilio, for example. And so I think if you are a Dash.io player that knows how to beat fatigue, you're in a very good spot for RTN season.
That's the big
one caveat.
One caveat, fatigue, because I'm playing, I played against a couple of Dash.io's side events at Worlds, and just, I was just trapping them to death and just, block it. It feels weird. Like the first time you realize you're just like, I got to block with my whole hand and just let them kill themselves. It feels strange, but I would say Dash.io is in a great spot anyway. The deck's really powerful because not everybody's going to play Fatigue, right? And not everybody's really good at playing Fatigue when they do play it. So there is that. I look at it, I'm like, okay, what else was kind of being like kind of hindered by these other decks that were at the top? Maybe I see like Kasai really make a big comeback, because like she's very powerful, and she was already doing some things just like Dash.io was, that this could be a little bit more wide open, especially like I'm looking at like Gravy could potentially still be at the top here, so you kind of like I'm looking at what heroes can deal with that. Now if he isn't, Guardian probably has a good shot of making a play in this format, which sounds crazy. We haven't had a good Guardian format in a while. I look at Warrior, I look at Guardian, I look at KO Armed and Dangerous for sure. It's all a matter of what gets pushed out. Is Dash.io the real deal? But I'm hoping, Tim, that this is the return of heavy hitters meta. You know what I'm saying? Except, what's the one difference this time? You don't have Dromai. And if it wasn't for Dromai and heavy hitters meta, I think, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think Riptide would have been the best deck. And now I'm going to make the case that Riptide is now S+ tier. And I'm going to have you try to refute that. Okay, listen. If Warrior's good, right? Riptide loves that matchup. No doubt. Always has, always will. Here's a frailty. Here's a trap. Have fun. We're gonna win. Boom. What's next? Assassin. Assassin could be good. You mentioned Slippy coming back. That was also a very cool Riptide matchup. Now, I should also say, and you're probably guessing this now, I'm more of a control Riptide player than any kind of aggro Riptide player. So I like to block with my traps and my cards. I'm looking at that. Okay. Will Guardian be an issue? It can be, but we have some really cool stuff with Sandscour Bow and Murky Water. We can push through. I think we can do it now. I think there's the opportunity. And then who else would be good? I don't know. Dash.io. We just block them to death. That's fine. Who else could be good? I don't know. That's it. I think that's just it. Riptide S+ tier now. Changed my mind. I'm ready to be brought back down to earth.
Oh, it kind of feels dirty doing that. You raised some very good points. How can I possibly refute that? I think, honestly, if you can just pair into warriors, assassins all day, then you're going to have a really good time on Riptide. In heavy hitters format, Riptide, if you could dodge Victor and once Dromai left, was in an amazing spot. He has a very good KO matchup, in my opinion, still does. And obviously, a very good warrior matchup, especially if you're more defensive leaning. I've been playing a lot of AIM Riptide, so Barb Castaway and Sandscour, and that version actually does pretty well into Guardian. So I might join you in the cope train here, to the point where I think Guardian overall as a class is now a favored matchup, at least for AIM, because if you think of decks like Jarl, Valda, they don't really run that many D-Reacts, and so having access to Dominate is a very good way to just basically kill them. I don't get sad when I see any Guardian other than Victor, because Victor can sometimes just smash your skull and there's not much you can do about it. But long gone are the days where I'd worry about getting fatigued into a Guardian, essentially. And I think Prism can maybe be a bit of a tough matchup if you're on one of the defensive Riptides, which is why I prefer to lean a bit more to the aggro side, push out the bigger numbers on the left side of the card instead of the right side. And
I was ignoring the fact that Prism even existed. I'm just remembering now.
maybe not much longer.
Yeah.
Again, if you choose to play like a more mid-range style Riptide list, I don't think it's too bad a matchup. And if you can bring a Cilio tech, then a Cilio is an okay matchup as well. You might get blown out on turn 0 or like turn 1 or whatever, but you know, that's not something you can control. And I guess Gravy, it depends if you can fatigue Gravies a lot more reliably now, especially at kind of like the RTN level, then I think Riptide's absolutely in the shout. And if Syndra's still good, then you've always had a good Syndra matchup, and now she's been brought down that a little bit more. So I kind of gave you a bit, took some away, maybe.
That's all right. That's all right. You know, I have a lot to think about, but
I will be on Riptide this coming season. I didn't touch him throughout Super Slam season because he could not beat both Verdants and Gravy. Not a chance. But with them being taken down, I'm absolutely back on Riptide. So
all aim counters, you think?
Yeah, I'll be on either Sandscour or Bard Castaway. I gotta put my money where my mouth is with Sandscour, I think.
Yeah. I think it's probably a safe bet. Yeah, no, I mean, clearly I'm being a little facetious with my Riptide as S+ tier, but in our hearts, he always has been. But I do think it could be a good season for him, right? And, you know, just naturally, in the past couple seasons, maybe not Super Slam, but, you know, before that, you would see one or two win a ProQuest or RTN, and, you know, the deck is good, and like, take the bait. Listen, I think people will tell you that card sucks, but I disagree. That's pretty much it. But like it is. I mean, like, tutors are very good. Being able to grab whatever you want is very good, and there's a lot of flexibility there. So it's going to be a fun RTN season, that's for sure. Now, any final thoughts here on Riptide or the meta as it stands before we get to some listener questions?
Yeah, no, I could talk about Riptide all day. So I do think he is, if you're well versed on the deck and you enjoy playing the deck, he is actually in a good spot for RTN season. I can't think of any matchup where you are less than maybe 40%. Like you do maybe have a lot of 45 55s or like just kind of 50-50s. Like you always have to work for the win, which is why I enjoy Riptide. But I don't think you have any awful matchups left. With Gravy and Verdants having had their knees capped a little bit, I think you're in with a good shout. And as you said, tutors are very good. If you can search Amulet of Echoes out and send a Heat Seeker into like an Acilio, for example, you can run a lot of cool tech cards with Take the Bait. So maybe don't run it in a list that's not Sandscour, but if you're wanting to play Sandscour Riptide, then Take the Bait offers you such a good way to target the kind of RTN field, as it were, because you can just put a one-of in your deck that's now suddenly 4 copies of it. So that'll lend you in good stead.
Yeah, I'm excited to see Well, most likely you win and make a video about it, and then I can watch it and be like, I should have played Tunic. Golly, you know. But I won't be. Now, moving on to some listener questions. These are submitted by the Buds in the Buds Discord, free for everybody to join and send questions. It's in the show notes below. First question comes from Capolo, who asks, which combination of hero text box with a different class from themselves, card pool, and equipment would be broken?
Yeah, this one is an absolute corker to read and try and make sense of. When I was first reading it, I was like, is that?
Yeah. So I'm thinking, which text box on a hero would be broken on a different hero and class pool, I guess. Or class pool.
Yeah. Oh, this one's so hard. Do you have an answer for this one at all?
Me? I think yes. If I had to, like, just off the top of my head, I would say Reinar's, because I would just throw it in Guardians and like figure out how to discard all those 6s and just like have really good, you know.
You'd have Fleshbag as well. Imagine Fleshbag in the Guardian. That'd be pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things that could go crazy in Guardian. So that would be off the top of my head. I don't know if there's really enough ways to like do discarding in Guardian, but I think you could make it work somehow, and it would be super powerful because then all of a sudden you're intimidating and then also sending these crush effects. That would be pretty crazy.
I've always thought that some combination of Acilio with Gravy Bones would make... I mean, Gravy Bones is already a nutty deck, but some form of combination between the two where Gravy Bones' hero ability is basically a better Acilio ability. Like, you get to draw the card and then choose what you get rid of. And so if you had that Acilio, that is pretty good. That in itself is a huge boon. And then you could maybe run some of the Broken Blues that Gravy does as well. Maybe get the hook just for the gold to generate the ability. Yeah, I don't know. Something along those lines is what's coming to my mind.
Yeah.
Maybe a bit stretch.
I mean, imagine like having the hook and then being able to lightning press something to just get it through and
yeah.
Ooh, that would be pretty brutal. Thanks for the question though, Capolo. Next question comes from Darth Prentice, who you already answered the first part of this question, but I'll read both of them. What's your favorite generic card? Bonus points if it blocks for 2. And then, have you read any good books this year?
Yep, so Ravenous Rabble is my favorite generic card, and it does block 2. So it's both requirements. Have I read any good books this year? So I have me and some of my friends, we have an Agatha Christie book reading club where we will read up to a certain chapter and then we'll get together and we'll all try and guess the solution to the book. And so we've recently just read Halloween Party, so I'd highly recommend that. But if you're wanting to get into some really, like, genuinely, like, mind-blowingly good books, and you like kind of the detective style, then anything in Poirot is pretty good. The Murder of Roger Ackroyd will forever stay in your mind if you read that. Trust me.
Sounds awesome. Sounds like a really fun club. Next question comes from William from the Table Pit, who first states, I think we all know they were a little light on the most recent bannings. Very funny. What other cards should they have banned?
In my opinion, I think Ancestral Empowerment should have been on that list. The amount of times you block perfectly on Chain Link 3 and Syndra just goes, nope. It's like, I should have given 2 cards instead of 1. I should have known you had the Empowerment. It's just the most feels bad card in the deck, I think. Is just when you get got by that, it's like, yeah, of course, you know. Mm-hmm. So I'd love to see that go. On a more general level, Arclight Sentinel, Scab Skins, and Warmonger's Diplomacy.
Oh, wait a second. Leave Scab Skins alone. Holy moly. I co-signed the Arclight Sentinel, though. I think they should have... I mean, I think I had said this before on the show, but if I were to hit Syndra, I thought in a meaningful way, it would have been Throw Dagger, which is kind of like a similar answer to Ancestral Empowerment, right? It's just like, okay, now I have to worry about, you know, another chance of them getting the mass trigger. which, and it replaced itself, which I think is like ridiculous, and it's a blue. So I don't know. That card feels like a little too good in Syndra to me. But moving on to Sigma's questions. Sigma asked a couple questions. First, I know you have wacky deck building ideas. What decks or top 3 decks that are in the oven waiting for better cards that never saw the light of day in paper?
I see. So this is quite an interesting one. Sigma likes to ask these sorts of questions. So I would say I did try a fire-breathing Riptide list at one point. Because what you can do with Reelin is you can get kind of this board state up, and then you can activate Reelin for like a huge amount, and then you draw into your blues, and then you can pay for fire breathing and try go for like an OTK style of thing. But it just doesn't work.
No.
You're really good into warriors because the deck is like 50% traps. So you just ping, 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 then fire breathing for 30 at the end of a game. So you beat warrior, but besides that, I don't think there's much you beat. And I guess I would also, to answer the third question and the first one at the same time, I would put Pitch Stack Acilio into that list. And I would also give it another try. I don't know if you're familiar with the Pitch Stack Acilio list, but it's basically you pitch Blast Oblivions, Electromagnetic Somersaults. Now you'd pitch Consign to Cosmos and Sigil Brilliance, and you just go blast, 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 spell for however much damage. And that deck didn't work because Syndra would just like kill you too quickly. You hit combo in that deck about turn 7, turn 8. So if you can survive till then, you're in a phenomenal spot. You guarantee OTK basically. You can even play around Amulet of Echoes by playing the Imperial Warhorn, for example. So that's a deck that I might try bring back to see if it has any sort of viability again, because it's a really funny deck. It's the easiest pitch stack you'll ever do in your life.
Yeah, I remember seeing that deck and being like, "Oh man, this would be really cool," but I'm not ready for that for that task. Yeah. But it could be the time. Yeah. So that was the third question was turbo stack defensive Osilia time is coming, A or nay? And you said A. Second question though was, what decks, class, or heroes do you enjoy more to deck build with?
I'm gonna have to be predictable, maybe not boring. I'd like to think at least not boring. I'll go with Ranger here because I think the card pool for Ranger is so toolboxy that if you know what kind of meta you're targeting and you put the practice in, you can really come out with a very well-tuned Ranger list that can do very well into the expected meta. I don't think any other class really has that kind of level of toolboxiness that Ranger does, especially Riptide with traps. So you can choose relevant buffs, relevant arrows, and relevant traps for the meta ahead and kind of come out with a very refined list. I enjoy it a lot.
I think that's a great answer. Thanks for the questions, Sigma. Thanks for the questions, everybody. And Tim, thank you for coming on the show. This is a lot of fun. Hope to have you back on sometime. Can you please plug anything you'd like to plug? And yeah, thank you again.
Yeah, sure. No, once again, absolute pleasure to be on here. It's a weird feeling having come from someone being very new at the game, watching podcasts like these ones, and now I'm talking to you. It's strange to talk to people that you hear very often, but you don't interact with yourself in a way. But if I was to plug, then I guess my own channel. If you like deck techs, Riptide stuff, then I'm the place to be. I do some gameplay as well and other random videos every now and then. And I'd like to shout out Dan and Gus. They do a lot of testing with me, and they also help me a lot with the channel in the background, both with the suggestions. I bounce a lot of ideas off them. So huge shout out to them, and a really big shout out to the Scottish community. They're all fantastic. Scottish events, they're great fun. It's a shame you didn't get the chance to play any while you're here, but perhaps one day when you come back for your anniversary, we can get you in.
Well, it was Pro Tour London actually while I was there. And I was like, maybe I could sneak down, which was obviously a big no from Lady Fresh. You know, she's very supportive of me playing, but not when we're on our honeymoon. But I don't know what's her deal. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, no, thank you for the kind words, by the way. And everybody can continue to find me on mostly Blue Sky at freshbudspod. Check out the Discord. If you're watching on YouTube, give us the old like, comment, subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify or whatever, I think you can rate. You can even comment on there, I think. And then Fresh Juice, an indie game podcast I do with my cousin. That's out weekly. And then we were reacting to the Game Awards this week, if anybody's interested in that. And then finally, the Patreon. I know I missed my bonus ep last week. It was a very busy work week for me, unfortunately, but it's the end of the year now. So we're back on schedule. There are bonus episodes every week, except for last week. But now, back to every week. How about that? And finally, Tim, always like to ask at the end of every show about some food. Talk about some food. I love food. Is there any food you want to shout out? Is there anything you're like, maybe local or that you've had in, your flesh and blood playing travels that you'd like to shout out?
I'll shout out the food in Bologna. We've been to Balharn, Bologna, and Colin Bologna now, and flesh and blood is always a good excuse to travel. And when we saw it was announced in Bologna, trust me, the food there, insane. I still dream about the food that I had there several years ago because it's that good. So shout out to Bologna. I would shout out Scottish food, but I think we all know it's not the best. It's good maybe when you've had a few beers and you need to fill up the stomach quickly, but that's about it.
Hey, listen, you're the salmon killer over there, right? You guys got, those cold Atlantic water, beautiful salmon. I like haggis. I'll tell you what, I do like it. I had quite a bit of it when I was over there, but maybe not the rest of everything going on. But, you guys got some good stuff over there. It's all good. But with all that, unfortunately, we don't have time for Charmer, but I'm sure we'll get to him at some point. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Buds. Everybody have a fresh week.